Sato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste and good morning. Welcome everybody. Today is a day of delight because today we're going to talk about the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a story which connects a distant part of Bengal in India 700 years ago to New York today. Because the Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, was founded right here in New York in the 1960s. So it's a story which is actually relevant to today and New York also, and to Bengal and to India, to our Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition because of the influence of the Vaishnava tradition on the Ramakrishna Vivekananda movement, for the tremendous respect, reverence and love in which Sri Ramakrishna held Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So just glimpses of his life. It's the love of God and the love of the name of God. Chant unceasingly the name of God. The story begins about 600 years ago in Bengal, in the place called Navadvipa. There's a village, Mayapur. And Sri Chaitanya was born to a pious Brahmin couple, Sri Jagannath Mishra and Shachi Devi. And he was named Vishwambhar. That is the name which was originally given to him. Actually, they had another son before that, Vishwarup. And Vishwarup had left home as a young boy and become a monk. So that's a story which is well known among Bengali culture. It's a part of Bengali culture, the young boy Vishwarup leaving home and becoming a monk. Just by the way, my name happens to be Vishwarup, so pre-monastic name. So it's very interesting. When I became a monk and in our ashram in Deoghar, Ramakrishna Mission Vidyapith Deoghar, so when I was introduced, just the day I joined, I was introduced to the teachers in the school. It's a school for kids. The teachers in the school, and a monk introduced me saying that this boy has come to be a monk. His name is Vishwarup. He'll be known as Brahmachari Vishwarup from now on, Vishwarup. I still remember a senior teacher who was a teacher of Hindi. He said, with a name like that, no wonder he's become a monk. So, Vishwarup, and the boy's name was, now you can see why he was named Vishwambhar. He was also called Nimai by his mother, and that also became the name by which he was actually more well known, Nimai. And also known as Gauranga because of his very fair complexion, golden complexion. Sometimes he's called the golden avatar of Krishna, of the Lord. So golden complexion. Gauranga literally means the one with golden limbs. And the boy grew up to be, there are lots of childhood stories of how he was energetic, enthusiastic, a very, very happy child, and mischievous, and the beloved of everybody in the community. They all loved him to bits. He was very intelligent. He did well in his initial studies in Sanskrit. Tragedy struck when his father died, when he was very young. And so for the rest of his life, it was Shachi Devi, his mother, who brought him up. And the old lady is very venerated in the Vaishnava tradition. In fact, another name by which Sri Chaitanya is known as is Shachi Nandan, the delight of Shachi Devi's child. And she enrolled him under the best pandits. One little background here, Navadvipa at that time was a center of great learning. So even till very recent times, until about a couple of 100 years ago, it was a center of the greatest pandits. The pandit does not mean the Wall Street pandit. The original word pandit comes from Sanskrit, and it means a scholar of traditional Sanskrit learning. And it continued to be so for centuries down until about 200 years ago, when it sort of faded out under the impact of the new colonial culture and English education. So all the sons and grandsons of the great Pandits, they went to English schools and colleges, and they forgot all the Sanskrit learning. The philosopher Janardhan Ganeri, who gave us talk here a few years back, he has written a book on the decline and disappearance of the culture of philosophy in Navadvipa. He calls it the lost age of reason. The lost age of reason, how this whole culture disappeared about 200 years back. But anyway, during Chaitanya's time, it was at its peak. There were great scholars in Navadvipa and people from across India. They came to there to learn. Learn what? Specifically one branch of philosophy called Navya Nyaya, the school of neologic. Nyaya is one of the schools of Indian philosophy, and they specialize in logic. And Navya Nyaya especially, it became, it's called the school of neologic. Neo, of course, India, 1,000 years old. So it started not in Navadvipa, in a place called Mithila, which is in Bihar. And Gangesha, a great logician who lived about 1,000 years ago, he wrote a masterpiece, Tattva Chintamani. So the jewel of principles of truth. So Tattva Chintamani. And again, little diversion here. It's just been translated into English. It's considered enormously difficult. It's one of the most difficult texts. Vedanta is child's play compared to that, to Navya Nyaya, and especially Tattva Chintamani, the masterpiece. But it's just been translated into English. I think it's 4 volumes in English. And it's actually an American philosopher. I'm forgetting his name. He was in UT Austin. He's retired now. He spent his lifetime translating it. Yeah. So anyway, diversions aside. When Chaitanya grew up there, or Nimai Pandit as he was known, he grew up there, brilliant scholar. He outshone all his friends in logic, and he was the darling of his teachers. He studied under one of the greatest scholars in Navadvipa at that time, Vasudeva Sarvapriyananda, who taught him not just philosophy but also language, grammar, poetics, and also Vaishnava theology and all of that. There are stories of how his friend was another brilliant logician, Raghunatha. And there's stories of how Nimai Pandit would regularly outshine even the most brilliant logicians. Their teacher, Vasudeva Sarvapriyananda, gave a particularly difficult problem in logic to Raghunatha, Chaitanya's or Nimai's classmate, who worked hard at it all day long and finally cracked the problem, as we would say. And when the same problem was given to Nimai, he solved it on the spot. So that was the kind of difference. But you see the beauty of this Nimai Pandit. There is a story of how one day they were going on a boat, Nimai and his friend Raghunath, classmate. And Raghunath had written this book on logic, and he expected it to be a masterpiece of logic. And Nimai also had written a book, another primer on logic. And Raghunath was curious to know what this book would be like. And so Nimai had the manuscript in his hand when they were going in a boat. And Raghunath asked to read it. And so when he read a few pages of it, he started weeping. And Nimai asked, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Look, nobody will read my book now. This is just too good." And Nimai snatched the book away, his own book, from Raghunath's hands and threw it into the river. So we never saw that book again. That gives you one of the biographers, Swami Sarvapriyananda writes, "The world lost a masterpiece of logic, but we gained a spiritual master." And in those days, it was a tradition to challenge great scholars, to challenge each other in fierce debates. And Nimai excelled at it. He would himself go out and challenge and defeat other noted scholars. And for a person of his age, it was incredible. There is a story of a visiting scholar. Everybody was scared of him. He was such an aggressive debater. And he treated the young Pandit Nimai with disdain. He's just a kid. So Nimai asked him, it was the moonlit night, Nimai asked him to compose a hymn on the virtues of Ganga, the river Ganga. It's on the bank of the Ganga, under this moonlit night. And that scholar, he composed apparently 100 verses, on some accounts 10 verses, immediately, impromptu. And Nimai he would hear one thing, he was what's called a Shrutidhara. That means you'd hear once and remember it. Sri Ramakrishna was also supposed to be like that. He would hear once and remember it, whatever he heard once. Somebody said of Swami Vivekananda would read something twice and then he would remember it. So Nimai, he picked out a verse in the middle of the hymn and displayed, I think, 9 or 10 defects in poetics in it. And to the horror of the scholar, he couldn't believe it. And he was quite heartbroken until in a dream, the goddess Saraswati revealed to him, the big scholar, that calm down, it's I who am speaking through that young Pandit. So it's no disgrace to be defeated by the goddess of learning herself, so it was all right. So there are stories like this, many stories. But the turning point came when Nimai goes to Gaya. Very interesting connection with Sri Ramakrishna. Nimai goes to Gaya for offering the funeral offerings for the ancestors, which traditional Hindus do. There he meets the monk Ishwara Puri, whom he knew earlier. And Ishwara Puri speaks to him about the devotion to Krishna and then initiates him into the Krishna mantra. And this revolutionizes the mind of the young Pandit. He is overcome by the love of Krishna, and especially a particular form of love which would dominate his life throughout, which is called viraha. Missing the presence of God in your life, the great sorrow. But remember, the great sorrow of missing the presence of God in your life is supposed to be much more delightful than the greatest delights of the world. If you shed one tear, it is said, I think Tukaram or Eknathji said it, if you shed one tear for God, it is 1,000 times more pleasing than all the smiles of the world, if you can cry for God. So missing the presence of God, viraha, the feeling that Radha and the gopis had when Krishna was not there, they were not in the presence of Krishna. And he comes back to his village. He has his own school by that time, but lo and behold, he's no longer interested in teaching logic. And in the classes, when he is teaching, the students would look at him with bewilderment, and he said, "Why are you staring at me like that?" And they said, "You're not teaching us, you're just talking about Krishna." And then he said with folded hands that it is not possible for me to continue teaching anymore, please pardon me. If you want your welfare, then give up all this dry logic and philosophy and take to the love of God, take to the name of Krishna, chant the name of Krishna. And he started a special form of worship which is now very popular, which is there in the villages and towns of Bengal and neighboring states, eastern part of India. But now here also, and all over the world, thanks to the ISKCON, it is the worship of, there's a chanting the names of God in a public Kirtan. It's called Nagar Sankirtan. Those forms were there in India. In the south, it is there, Nagar Sankirtan is there. But he popularized on a mass scale. So the Vaishnavas, by the way, Krishna Chaitanya is not the founder of the school of Vaishnavism. The Bengal school of Vaishnavism is much older than him. But he sort of made it major and revived it. He would take the Vaishnavas on, early morning walkabouts in the city or the village, and they would have these big drums called khol and cymbals called kartal, and they would sing the name of Krishna and Hari and dance. And it was quite a sight to behold. And others, everybody would be invited to join in. And a number of Vaishnavas soon became very devoted to Chaitanya, to Nimai. I'll soon call him Chaitanya because he'll now become Chaitanya when he becomes a monk. That's his monastic name. Not without without detractors. Some of the townspeople were very annoyed with this young fellow who roused them from their sleep early in the morning, insisting that they sing and dance in the name of Krishna. Not all were very interested in the singing and dancing in the name of Krishna. So remember, at that time, Bengal was administered by the Muslim Sultan. And so they complained to the judge, the Qazi, that this man is creating a nuisance and should be brought under control. And the Qazi gave orders to stop the Kirtan. And this led to one of the closest followers of Sri Chaitanya coming to him. His name was Haridas. Now, Haridas was a Muslim, but he became so influenced by the Kirtan, he became a devotee of Krishna. But remember, in Islam, this is apostasy. This is punishable by death. So the Qazi sentenced him, Haridas, to be lashed publicly, whipped until he died. And so when the soldiers were whipping him, but with every lash he felt a thrill of, there's a chair here, come on, quick, don't hesitate, yes. He would feel a thrill of bliss. And when the soldiers thought that he was dead, they threw his body into the river. But the cold water revived him, and he went to Chaitanya and told him the whole story of how, instead of killing him, he just felt bliss when he was being tortured in this way. Later on, the whole thing with the Qazi was sorted out. The Qazi himself came to Sri Chaitanya when he heard about Chaitanya, and he asks, there's a beautiful incident. He calls Chaitanya Gaur Hari. That's another name by which he is known. Gaur means the golden, and Hari. Gaur Hari, is it true that the Hindus worship Narayana? And in this Sankirtan which you are doing, is you sing the name of Narayana, and are you Narayana? And Chaitanya, or Nimai, he took hold of one of the Qazi's fingers and said, you have taken the name Hari, Narayana and Sankirtan in one sentence. All your sins are forgiven. Now that's the judge. He's the one who's supposed to judge. But when Chaitanya says this, to the astonishment of everybody, this Muslim judge, he burst into tears and fell at the feet of Chaitanya. And then he later issued orders that the Kirtan should not be stopped at all. Nobody should hamper the Kirtan. Many other, they were converted to Chaitanya, to becoming followers of Chaitanya. There was one Advaita Acharya who was, he was not a teacher of Advaita, he was a teacher of Vaishnavism, but much older than Chaitanya. At first he was skeptical. People went and told him about this young boy who would lead kirtans, singing and dancing in the name of Krishna. But then he had a dream, and he told the other Vaishnavas that last night Krishna came to me in my dream and said that he whom you have been pining for, worshipping, praying to, I have come again in the form of Nimai. So Advaita Acharya, it took him time. He was skeptical at first, but he became converted to that. He felt that this is a divinity. It's not an ordinary holy man, nor a philosopher, nor an ordinary holy man. There is a divine presence. A real incarnation has come once again to this world. And he became a close follower, although Nimai was much younger than him. One example of, an important example is what is called among Vaishnavas, the Mahaprakasha. So one of his close devotees was this very devoted person called Srivasa. And he would throw open his house in the courtyard for the Vaishnavas to gather in the evening for their worship and their prayer and the singing and chanting and dancing. And this would go on till late in the night. One evening, Nimai comes to their house. Gauranga comes to their house, and Srivasa's house. And he sits on the seat which is generally kept open, like this is in the worship altar where Vishnu is worshipped. So Gauranga goes and sits there, Nimai goes and sits there. But they felt it was quite fitting because the devotees who had gathered around, they felt a divine and awesome presence in front of him. He was silent and calm and composed, but the descriptions are that he fairly glowed. They came and worshipped him with all kinds of fragrant flowers. People bought a lot of food offerings. In the Vaishnava religion, food is very important. All sorts of delicious food. If you go to the Vaishnava temples, you'll find a lot of arrangement of. So they bought food offerings to him, and they kept staring at him, at his extraordinary, sublime beauty, and in his presence, everybody felt uplifted. A kind of holy atmosphere vibrated there in the house of Srivasa that evening. As evening fell, they felt this is a time for arati, the waving of the lamps, and they felt we should do arati to Gauranga. And they invited his old mother, Sachi Devi, that she couldn't have been that old because he was in his early 20s. But in those days, I guess above 40 is old. when Vivekananda calls Sri Ramakrishna the old man. He was barely 48 or 49 at that time. So she came and she bowed down to Chaitanya. Now, that you generally don't do in an Orthodox Hindu household. It's the children who bow down to the parents. She bows down to Chaitanya, to Gauranga, and Gauranga, to the astonishment of everybody, he put his foot on his mother's head. Because she felt, this is not my son, not just my son, this is Sri Krishna himself. And as he did that, the old lady, she went into an ecstasy, into samadhi. And when she arose from that samadhi, she chanted from the Bhagavata Purana the praises which Devaki had chanted, the mother of Krishna, in praise of Krishna. Those verses she chanted to Gauranga. This threw a thrill around the crowd, and the Kirtan was going on. Then Gauranga started calling the close devotees one by one. There was this one person, Sridhara. He was a very poor man. This is some notable incidents. Sridhara is a very poor man. He used to supply what is called plantain leaves. In those places, even now I've seen, they eat on that. So there's a big leaves, you put it on the ground, wash it, and then serve food on the leaf. It's actually a very nice way of eating. So he was a very, very poor man and quite insignificant in the aristocratic society there. Gauranga calls him and says, "Tell me, what do you want? Do you want a kingdom?" And this desperately poor person says, "No. I want to be a servant of your servants. Give me that." And Gauranga embraces him. And this man goes into samadhi, into an ecstasy. Next, he calls this person Murari, who was a devotee of Rama and Sita. So when he comes, he has a vision of Rama and Sita in the body of Gauranga. And Gauranga blesses him also. Like this, one by one. The Muslim devotee Haridas, he comes and narrates in front of Gauranga his ordeal and how he survived that by devotion to God, by love of God. And in all of this, they all noticed he was not calling the closest and the most devoted and simplest, very saintly soul, young man called, actually not young, an elderly man called Mukunda, who was most devoted to Gauranga. But Gauranga was not calling him, to the discomfiture of everybody else present. But they said that he should be the first to go in front of Gauranga. So somebody suggested to him that he is standing outside the house. Can we not call him in and you give him your blessings? And he said, "Go and tell him that Mukunda will not get to see me in 10 million births." So they went and told him that. They were shocked and they didn't know what he'll probably die if he hears this. No, he burst into laughter and started dancing. That in only 10 million births I will get to see the Lord. And then Gauranga calls him in and says, to demonstrate what true faith, what true devotion is, and he embraces Mukunda. In this way it goes on. There's an amazing display of an extraordinary divine presence, as if in that evening, the entire house was as if lit up just by the physical presence of Chaitanya. And it was almost too much to bear. A group of devotees went to him and said, "We want to feel your human presence again. If we feel a divine presence in the house, it's awesome. We can't bear it." And everybody there's hundreds of people, as if rooted to the spot for hours and hours. They couldn't take it anymore. And Gauranga said, "Yes." And with a great shout, there's a description, he fell on the ground and his body turned deathly white. And they thought it was almost like he's dead. But somebody sang Kirtans of Radha and Krishna and he came back to his former self and again started weeping for Krishna, as if he's the devotee. So showing that in him there were two. There is Krishna and Chaitanya the devotee, or Gauranga the devotee, in the same body. This you see in Sri Ramakrishna again and again. He in fact explicitly said, in this body there are two. There is the child and the mother. Mother is Kali and the child is also there. So sometimes most of the time he would be the child worshipping God as mother. But sometimes he would speak as God, as the mother. I think that's the deep secret or the deep reality of the incarnation. They're both human, human in the sense of a devotee, of a seeker of God, of a lover of God, of an enlightened person, a saint, a sage. That's one side. That's the human side. And they have a divine side. Ordinary saints, saints are not ordinary, but the usual saints we read about in different religions of the world, they have one side only. That they are human beings who have, through extraordinary effort and piety and practice and grace, they have risen to a high spiritual plane. That's a saint. And the incarnation shows that side of it, but also shows a divine side which is not seen in human beings. That's what makes them an incarnation. Again, little aside here. There was a professor here of Christian theology who gave a talk, and I was asking him, see, modern studies in Christianity in the last 200, 300 years have thrown up a problem. It started with systematic investigations in Germany. Trust the Germans to spoil everything. So, for example, these modern textual studies, they show that nowhere in the synoptic gospels, in the first three gospels, Christ refers to himself as an incarnation, as the Son of God. Mm-hmm. It's only then the modern scholar will say, well, it was sort of introduced later on. Now I say that this is difficult. For suppose there's a Christian pastor talking about Christ, and at the same time he has read these modern studies in Christianity. Now there is what is called, we call a dharma sankat. There is a conflict. He genuinely believes Christ is an incarnation of God, as we do, is the Son of God. And yet modern studies show that probably that was something introduced later. So I said to the scholar that, how about this? Our understanding of the incarnation in Hinduism is that the incarnation has both sides. So it's quite likely that Christ spoke both as the human being and as the Son of God. Both sides are there. There's a divine side and there's a human side to it. And that you see in recent incarnations which are documented clearly in Chaitanya, and of course more clearly in Sri Ramakrishna. He wasn't impressed. I mean, he didn't want to accept it. After this, Chaitanya, another interesting story without which no Chaitanya story is complete is the reformation of Jagai and Madhai, which every Bengali knows. So there were two ruffians in that area who terrorized the people, harassed them, and created all sorts of problems. By this time, Chaitanya had a companion, Nityananda. So Nityananda, there's an interesting background. Chaitanya had said, a great saint is coming, call him and bring him to me. And some say Nityananda was his long-lost brother, his elder brother who had become a monk. Some say, we're not very sure about that. But anyway, afterwards, Nityananda became his close companion for many years, as long as he was there in Navadvipa. So, in fact, so much so, they would speak of the two brothers, Gaur Nitai. That's a phrase in Bengali now. Gaur is Gauranga, Nitai is Nityananda. And later on, Chaitanya asked Nityananda to actually spread this teaching. Chaitanya was a monk, but Nityananda, he asked him to spread this teaching among the householders. So there's a householder tradition among the Vaishnavas, tracing it back to Nityananda. But this Chaitanya, Nityananda, Gaur and Nitai, both of them went to these two ruffians, Jagai and Madhai. And at first they were furious, the Jagai and Madhai, and one of them threw a stone at them. They started throwing stones at Gaur and Nitai. One of those stones hit Nityananda, he bled, and then anyway, the whole story is that Chaitanya reformed the two, and they were overcome, and they became devotees. They became great Vaishnavas. One of them constructed a ghat, a bathing ghat. It's all on the bank of Ganga. So a bathing ghat. Ghat means where people go down. You can wash your clothes. You can take a dip in the holy river and so on. And so these so-called these ruffians, they constructed a ghat, and I think it was Jagai probably. He would sit there and he would beg the Vaishnavas that step over this sinful body as you go down to bathe in the ghat. It's at this time that I tell the story. I've told it many times, but it bears telling again. So this is a well-known piece of theatre in Bengali culture, the rescue of the reformation of Jagai and Madhai. And I saw a particularly hilarious example of that many years ago. It's performed every year, and it's across Bengal. It's on stage. It's like a spiritual Broadway. So that particular one I witnessed was near our monastery in a big auditorium. But the thing was, the theatre troupe which performed the play, they were amateurs and they hadn't rehearsed. So they didn't really know the lines well. And what happened was, on stage, they would all enter through this side of the stage and they would all rush to the other corner, not in the center stage. Why? Because the prompter was sitting there with the lines, and they wanted to be close to him to hear the lines, because none of them had memorized the lines. So you would see Jagai and Madhai creating all sorts of trouble, but they would all be there at the end of the stage. And the Vaishnavas and Nityananda and Chaitanya all enter and go there, to the delight of those who are watching. Most of them were kids, and they would laugh and roll with laughter. And the climax came when the Jagai, who was a big ruffian, had a big mustache like this, and he was yelling abuse at Nityananda. And what happened was, when he was yelling abuse at Nityananda, one part of the mustache came down, it was dangling like this. He didn't know, but the kids in the front row saw it, and they wouldn't stop laughing. And the actor who acted as Chaitanya was good at improvising. So what he did was, he was seeing the whole play was falling apart. So he quickly went and covered Jagai's mouth and said, "Don't say such things," and corrected put the mustache back on, to the delight of all the little kids who clapped and clapped after. So that is a famous incident when these two ruffians were reformed into saintly souls. The next big thing happens when Gauranga goes to get sannyasa. A monk of one of the 10 orders of monks started by Shankaracharya, Keshava Bharati. He was the sannyasa guru for Gauranga. He gave the orders of sannyasa to, the vows of monasticism to Gauranga. And this is also immortalized in Bengali plays, that how Nimai or Gauranga becomes a monk. Now when you become a monk, you have to leave your birthplace and go away. So that's seen as a great tragedy. It's like a spiritual tragedy. And you leave your parents. His father was dead, but his mother, old mother, who had cared for him, and he had already lost one son to that was his elder brother. Now the young boy who was so dear to her said, "Now I'm a monk, I can't stay here with you and everybody else, I have to leave." And she begged to be able to at least get news of him sometimes. His original idea was he would go away to Vrindavan, the famed place where Sri Krishna had his Leela, as his divine play. At that time, remember, Vrindavan was basically nothing. It had been destroyed by invasions, and it was sort of been forgotten by history. There were villages there and some old temples which had been partially destroyed. So he wanted to go there. But his mother begged him that if you go so far away, it's about 1700 kilometers away from Navadvipa. In those days, through roads. And all of the distance you would have to walk. So he finally said, "All right, as an alternative, I will stay in Puri," which is in Orissa or Kalinga in those days, which is to the southeast of Bengal. And it's famous as the temple town of Jagannath. Jagannath is another name for Krishna. So it's also very, very holy for Vaishnavas, for the devotees of Krishna or devotees of Vishnu. So his name became Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Bharati. So that's why he's known as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just as Chaitanya or Krishna Chaitanya. So Chaitanya said that I will stay there in Puri, so that now Puri is a place where a lot of Bengali Vaishnavas, even till today, lots and lots of them, they go for pilgrimages. Of course, they are now completely outnumbered by tourists. So it's on the sea coast of the Bay of Bengal. It's a wonderful, very ancient town. And the temple itself, in its modern form, is already over 1100 years old, 1100 years old. But ancient, there are mentions of that going back to 3000 years. So Chaitanya starts walking with a close group of his followers. He starts walking for This is another important stage in the life of Chaitanya. When he leaves Bengal for Puri, and he's extraordinarily impatient to get to Puri. And so he says how he walks. There's a description of, he was a very tall man. So he's walking fast, almost running. He can't contain himself, his impatience to reach Puri. And they cross, remember it's all by road. And it's a different kingdom. Bengal at that time was ruled by a Muslim ruler. Puri by a Hindu ruler, the famous Pratap Rudra. He was a very powerful king and belonged to the dynasties. The kings there are called the Gajapatis, the elephant lords. Even now there's the kings there, they call the Gajapati, elephant lord. So they crossed into the borders and they entered into what is today called Orissa. In those days it was an ancient kingdom called Kalinga. More than nearly 1500 years before this, the great Kalinga war had been fought there. The great emperor Ashoka, he converted to non-violence after the massacres of the Kalinga war and all. So that was 1500 years before this. So a very ancient place, steeped in history. So Chaitanya approaches with his followers towards the great temple of Jagannath in Puri. On the way, two notable incidents. One is he comes to the temple of Gopinath, a Krishna temple, in a place called Remuna. It's about 40 miles away from Cuttack, I think. He comes there. It's a beautiful image. And there's a story, Sri Chaitanya. So I'm narrating these stories. There are many such things, but I'm narrating just a few. He narrates the story of this image of Krishna, Gopinath, in Remuna there, in the Gopinath temple. He says, this is a story told to him by his Guru Ishwar Puri, who had given him the mantra of Krishna. And Ishwar Puri's Guru, Madhav Puri, told this story. So Madhav Puri was in Vrindavan, and he had established, so this is Chaitanya's Guru's Guru. He had established a temple called Govardhandhari in Vrindavan, Madhav Puri had. And once he got a vision of Krishna telling him that, I want sandal paste to be rubbed over me, the image of Krishna. And that sandal paste which I want, it has to come from Puri, from my temple in Puri. It's a test of his faith, because from Vrindavan to Puri is approximately 2,000 kilometers, which the whole distance he would have to walk through forests and rivers and multiple kingdoms. And then he would have to get all this sandalwood and carry it all the way 2,000 kilometers back. And Madhav Puri set out, undaunted. And he comes, on the way to Puri, he comes to this temple of Gopinath in Remuna. Now this temple, it's famous for the food offering, a kind of payas. What would you call a payas? A rice pudding. Rice pudding is offered, kheer is offered to the Lord there. And it's famous for its nectarine taste. It's called the Amrit Keli. It's basically condensed milk, but there's a special formula they make it. So it's supposed to be delicious. I think I've had it once, but I've forgotten really. I have a faint memory. They say that you can't forget it once you taste it. So in a sense it's true. But so Madhav Puri, he was curious. When he came to the temple, he chanted and he sang in front of the image of Gopinath, and Gopinath appeared to him in a dream. And but he didn't want to beg for that Amrit Keli. But Gopinath appeared in a dream to the priests of the temple and told him that this wandering monk gave him some of that prasad. So they gave him a pot of that and he tasted it and he was very happy. And then he goes on to the temple of Jagannath. Remember, we are talking about Chaitanya's Guru, Madhav Puri. Then he goes on to Jagannath Puri, where the temple priests, they realize he's a genuine saint and they help him to get the sandalwood he needed to make the paste. And then he starts walking back, undaunted, 2,000 kilometers. But as he walks back past this temple, he gets a dream where Krishna appears to him and says, you don't have to bring it all the way back to Vrindavan. Here in this temple, you make a paste of this sandalwood, put camphor in it and apply it on the image here. And I and that, we are the same. So that's what he did. So that's the whole story. Chaitanya and his followers reach that temple. It's an extraordinarily beautiful. Nowadays you can see it online, of course. The images, a beautiful image of Gopinath sings and dances there. And the priests were very impressed with Chaitanya and his very devout followers. So they gave them 4 pots of that Amrit Keli. Next, the small party, it reaches a place called Katak, which is also a very ancient city. And there is a temple called Sakshi Gopal, the Krishna as the witness. That also is a very interesting story. The whole story I will not tell you. There are long, long stories. I'll cut it short. Basically, there was a young devotee of Krishna who, for very complicated reasons, wanted Krishna, God, to stand as witness for him. And so he goes to Vrindavan and he appeals to Gopal, Krishna, that I want you to be a witness for me in my home, which is in Orissa, in Kalinga. It's nearly 2,000 kilometers from here. And Krishna comes to him in a dream and says that, yes, I will stand witness for you. You lead the way, I'll follow you. The only condition is don't look back. If you look back to check, see, it's faith. The whole thing is about faith. If you look back to check, I will stop wherever you look back. And so the young man, he walks, and he's almost done. He's near Puri. And of course, he checks. He looks back, and there is Krishna standing behind him, who immediately becomes a little image and stays there. And so that is Sakshi Gopal, the temple of Sakshi, the witness Krishna. So even now it is a major place of pilgrimage. Again, a very, very beautiful image of Krishna. It's you can see the picture. Even in the pictures, it looks living. And Krishna is worshipped there as Sakshi Gopal. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in an ecstasy in front of that image. He sang and they danced, and they say that the hairs on his body stood on end again and again in thrills of ecstasy at seeing the image of Sakshi Gopal. Sometimes he would run forward and run back, sometimes, and then he would laugh, sometimes he would roar, sometimes he would fall as if in a faint. And the devotees would surround him and sing and chant. And they spent the whole night there in front of Sakshi Gopal, singing and dancing and chanting. Next day, they went forward, and then very soon came in front of so there's a whole description of how he goes to the temple of Jagannath. And you can see the way it's described, the building up to the climax of reaching Puri Jagannath. So he can see from a distance about 6 miles. In those days, you could see the top of the huge temple of Jagannath, the spires of the temple. So the devotees who would come there would stop there to see the first vision, darshan of the top of the temple in the distance. From that point onwards, the narrator says, Sri Chaitanya's progress slowed to almost a crawl. He had been rushing, but now, as if in anticipation of prolonging his first darshan vision of the Lord, he slowed almost to a crawl. All the distance he danced and he sang, and he went into paroxysms of ecstasy with hair standing on the end, laughing, crying. And then when they reached the city and they went to the temple, so he insisted on going in alone first. And his followers knew that there's something going to happen, drama. So they told him, be careful, the temple guards are there, the temple servants, they will not allow you to go and touch Jagannath. They knew what was in his mind. They will not allow you to go and touch Jagannath, the image of Jagannath there. So there in the temple you find, those who have gone there, they find the image of Jagannath, that is Krishna, and his brother Balaram or Balabhadra, and Subhadra, his sister. So the 3 of them are there. So it's a very powerful place. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna, very deliberately, that's one place he did not go to. He said, if I go there, I will not come back alive. If I see Jagannath there in the temple, I'll give up the body. So after his passing, Ma Sharada, she was made of sterner stuff. So she went and she took up this picture of Sri Ramakrishna and she showed it to Jagannath, and so that Jagannath also sees Sri Ramakrishna also sees Jagannath in the picture. And she carried it like this, the picture. I've seen a photograph of her standing with the picture in the Jagannath temple. It's not real. It's an AI fake or something like that. And there's no photograph of that. But it's true. It depicts a true incident. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enters the temple. He would not listen to anybody. He enters the temple, and his first vision of the image of Jagannath and Balabhadra and Subhadra, of course, he goes into samadhi and he rushes forward, breaking through the cordon of guards and embraces, and about to embrace Jagannath, but he fell down in the process. And the guards came to beat him up. Luckily, they were stopped by a very venerable figure, an elderly Brahmin, none other than Chaitanya's teacher from his childhood, Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, who was now in Puri as the court scholar of the Gajapati Prataparudra, the elephant lord. So he was the court pandit, and he was, of course, a very respected figure. And he saw this young monk, and he felt that there's something very special about him, and told the guards not to beat him up. And so they carried him. The devotees, by this time, his followers entered. They lifted his unconscious body, and they carried him out. And Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, for some reason, he was overcome by seeing this devotion to Jagannath. He even touched the feet of Chaitanya in that state. Vasudeva Sarvabhauma said, bring him back to my home, and as long as you are here, you all will be my guests. And then he recognized who Chaitanya is, that you are that boy. And he was not really very... so then his old idea of his... See, I'm a great scholar. He's my student. And I'm so much more elderly and senior and learned than him. He's just a boy. And then his skepticism came back. And he started... he was very affectionate to Chaitanya, but he said, look, you need to study Vedanta. You give up all this sentimentalism. This is just silliness. All this singing and dancing and crying. Look, from tomorrow onwards, I will start, if you want, I'll start teaching you Vedanta. You're a monk now, so you need to study Vedanta. Chaitanya, humble as always, said, as you say, sir, I'll study. And so the teaching started. He started expounding from Vedantic texts. I think it was the Brahma Sutras, Shankara's commentary. And Chaitanya sat silent and rapt in attention. And then at one point, Vasudeva Sarvabhauma felt something was wrong. He said, are you following what I'm saying at all? And Chaitanya said, I'm sorry, but what the text says, the original text of Vyasa, the Brahma Sutras, I understand that perfectly. But neither Shankara's commentary makes any sense, nor your explanations. This made the old man furious. And he challenged him outright to a debate, which Chaitanya thoroughly trounced him at. And the old man was utterly shaken, because his pride in his scholarship was shaken. And he bowed down to Chaitanya, and when he lifted his eyes, instead of Chaitanya, he saw there, he had a vision. The vision of a six-armed deity. Two of the arms were of Ramachandra, holding a bow and arrow. Two of the arms were, two hands, they were playing a flute, Krishna. And two other arms held a water pot and a stick, the danda and kamandula of a monk. That is Chaitanya himself, the six-armed. Many others also saw him in this form. And he was so overcome, he went into samadhi, this Vasudeva Sarvabhauma. When he came back from samadhi, he bowed down and he realized that this is no ordinary person. Next day, very early, even when Vasudeva Sarvabhauma was sleeping, Chaitanya went, he would go, as long as he was in Puri, he would go every day to the temple of Jagannath. He went to the temple of Jagannath, got some offered food, prasad, which is very famous. Jagannath prasad is very famous. It's probably also the most delicious food I've ever tasted. Many people will attest to that. So he got some of that, and he woke up Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, said, here is the sacred food offering of Jagannath. Now, a traditional Brahmin will never eat like that. First they will take their bath and do the sandhya, the rituals, then only take food after worship. But when Chaitanya offered it, it was a test. Chaitanya offered it, Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, without any complaint, he took it as he partook of that food. And Chaitanya blessed him. That vision which Sarvabhauma had of Chaitanya, that depiction, that image is there even now in the Jagannath temple, that six-armed deity, it's there. And the influence of Chaitanya immediately spread there, because now the court pandit, is a disciple of this young monk. And there are amazing descriptions of his daily visits to the temple. There's a pillar there where he would stand and watch with unblinking eyes. He would watch the image of Jagannath and Subhadra and Balabhadra from a distance. And his body would heat up so much. It's unbelievable, but now after Sri Ramakrishna's example, we know some of those things were verified by people who watched him. That pillar is still there. And part of it is a melted handprint, because he would stand there like this and watch. And so the print of his hand is still there. It's high, he was tall. It's still there. That means his body would heat up so much with his emotion. There are many stories of it. There's a huge crush often in the temple of Jagannath. It's very difficult to stand in one place. And his disciples and devotees would try to surround him and protect him because he was often unaware of his surroundings. Once, in the press of the crowd, an old lady who had come from some village, remote village, had come to see Jagannath, but she was short and bent and old, and of course in the crush of body she couldn't see. And in her frenzy to see Jagannath, she climbed on the shoulders of the first man in front of her, a tall man who was none other than Chaitanya, to see Jagannath, putting her knees on his shoulder and climbing over him, to the fury of the surrounding crowd who tried to drag her down, and he stopped them. Don't disturb her. See, this is real devotion. So there are many such wonderful stories of that. And daily Kirtan started singing and dancing. The king, he came to be aware of this young monk, Prataprudra. He wanted to see. Chaitanya was very firm. As a monk, he said, I cannot associate with powerful or wealthy people. And so the devotees, they knew the king was a genuine devotee of Jagannath. So they dressed him in the dress of an ordinary person. And in the crowd, he went to meet Chaitanya. And Chaitanya was impressed with him. He saw genuine devotion there. And so afterwards, he would go regularly to meet with Chaitanya. Vasudeva Sarvabhauma told him about a very great devotee of Krishna called Rai Ramananda. Chaitanya was going on a pilgrimage to the south of India. So with a group of devotees he left, and Vasudeva Sarvabhauma told him that you go on the bank of this particular river, there is a great devotee, you should speak with him, you will like it. And there is this discussion between Chaitanya and Rai Ramananda. Rai Ramananda was a powerful man, he was a governor of a province, but he was a great devotee of Krishna. So this discussion is very important for understanding the inner theology, the philosophy of Bengal school of Vaishnavism. Chaitanya recognizes Rai Ramananda immediately as a great devotee of Krishna. Rai Ramananda is very impressed by this young monk who feels there's something special about him and invited him to stay with him. So there's this very famous conversation between Rai Ramananda and Chaitanya. And Chaitanya brings out the essence of bhakti. What is truly the love of God? By a series of questions which he asks to Ramananda to evoke it. So he says, tell me about bhakti. And Rai Ramananda says, well, bhakti is the loving service of God, a pious person leading an ethical life and worships God and dedicates his life to God. So Chaitanya, he has a series of answers. He says, Ehu baat jo aage kaho avar, that this is superficial, this is external. Go deeper or go forward. Then Rai Ramananda says, bhakti is the lover of God who gives up all his external duties and just loves God, lives worshipping God. And Chaitanya says, even this is exterior, surface. Go forward, go further, deeper. And then Rai Ramananda says that the true lover of God gives up even the external worship. And it is just the pull of the heart. Day and night he lives in the love of God. Chaitanya says, even this is exterior, go deeper. And he says, the true devotee of God considers himself as a servant of the Lord, is a living presence. I remember a great monk who has passed now, and a Vedantic, very young Vedantic monk asks him a question. If I have a clear conviction and clarity about Brahman, the one existence consciousness bliss, is there what next? What's there? And this great monk told him that now establish a relationship with that. Having realized it, now go back into the mode of being this person and that divinity and establish a relationship. So Raya Ramananda says, the true lover of God who feels the pull of the love in his heart, he or she establishes the relationship of a servant. You are ever living, present master. I am your servant. Hanuman is a great example of such love. And Chaitanya says, even this is exterior. Go deeper. Go forward. He says, then you establish the relationship. The lover of God establishes the relationship of a friend, like Arjuna, like Uddhava with Krishna. God is my friend. It's closer, more intimate. He says, this is exterior. This is still surface. Go deeper. And Raya Ramananda says, you have the relationship of Vatsalya, that is, God is my child. So, like the baby Krishna and his mother, or Ram Lala, and that's the idea of the God as a baby. In Christianity also it's there, the baby Jesus. And so the baby Krishna, the baby Rama, that's a very high form of love of God, where you consider God to be your child. And then he says, even this is exterior, go further. And then he says, Raya Ramananda says, where you love God as your husband. So you're the bride of the Lord. So this bridal mysticism, like he says, it is Rukmini or Satyabhama, she is the bride of Krishna. And then Krishna, at that time, he doesn't say this is exterior or this is surface. He says, go a little further. He says, not even a bride, just a lover of Krishna, which even formally the society does not recognize you as the bride of Krishna, but you are the lover of Krishna. So the gopis of Vrindavan, they are the highest love of God. Again, here Chaitanya doesn't say this is exterior or superficial. No, he says, you're right, go just a little bit more. And he says, among the gopis, there is Radha, whose love is par excellence. There's nobody even close to that. And then Chaitanya puts his hand on Raya Ramananda's mouth and he says, no more. That is it. So this whole discussion. And they spent 10 days together talking about Krishna, singing, in dancing together, in what the governor's officers must have thought is way beyond me. So, and then both in ecstasy together. In that ecstasy, Raya Ramananda had an extraordinary vision. Not the six-armed deity others saw. He saw Radha and Krishna together in the body of Chaitanya. Afterwards, when he came back from that ecstasy, he asked Chaitanya about it. And Chaitanya told him this innermost secret of the whole Chaitanya movement. This is the esoteric secret, heart of it. They generally will never talk about it. He said to Raya Ramananda, what you have seen is true. Krishna wanted to taste Radha's love. So Krishna is the Lord. The only thing that is more powerful than God is the love of God. So God controls everything, but the only way God can be controlled is if you love God. And the greatest love of God is Radha's love of God. And now Krishna became curious. What is it to love God like Radha loves God? So I want to feel Radha's love for me. And he says, so he was born as Radha externally. And that means with the body and the mind, and which is Radha, and internally is Krishna. So his whole life is a pining, is a loving, is a missing, deep missing of the presence of God, of the pining for God. And then he said to Raya Ramananda, I am that. So I am Krishna come in this age in order to taste Radha's love for me. So I am Radha externally and Krishna internally, both together. And then he said, never tell anybody about this. Of course, it became part of Vaishnava theology later on, so we know all about it. It's open secret. And then Krishna Chaitanya told Raya Ramananda, I am going on the pilgrimage. After I complete the pilgrimage, I'll come back to Puri. In those days, it was known as Nilachala. So I come back to Puri. And you come, you give up your post, give up all of this, and come, and we'll spend our days together till the end of our lives talking about Krishna and singing and dancing. And give up all this power, it's done for you. And Rai Ramananda did that. And so after Chaitanya came back, after a long pilgrimage, nearly 2 years, and Rai Ramananda came to Puri and lived the rest of his life with Chaitanya. It still happens. There are people who give up in India, it's known to happen. People who give up everything, just go there and live the most humble lives. There are people who just go and are there, who are cleaning the temples. Just the garbage in temples, but they have been big people in their life before that. There was one story in, quite amusing but touching also, in the papers about 10 years, not 10, 20 years, 25 years back in India, in the newspapers. There was this big policeman, a director general of police, and he was a devotee of Krishna. And so one of the esoteric practices is to think of yourself as one of the companions of Radha. You do not presume to think of yourself as Radha loving Krishna. No. You are to watch the love of Krishna and Radha. And you are one of the companions, girlfriends of Radha, who helps Radha to meet Krishna. And that's your ultimate goal. And so that's an inner feeling. But that's the soul and God. So that's your whole purpose. They're called Sakhis. And so they will, whether they're men or women, they will dress themselves as women. And they sing and dance and worship Krishna all day long and everything. So that's what this Director General of Police would do. He would come dressed as a traditional finery of a gopi in a gown, come dancing into the office. Imagine the NYPD chief coming dancing into the office. It created a scandal. And at that time the government, it became news in the newspapers. And he turned his wife out of his house saying that, "Who are you, woman? I am the woman in this house. I am the lover of Krishna, the gopi, the Sakhi of Radha." And you might think it was crazy, but the story ended in a very interesting note. The government tried to dismiss him, but he's a very senior officer. They couldn't find what rules are there. There's no rule which says that you can't dance. The police chief can't dance. Is there any rule which says you can't dance in office? No. And he was doing all his work. He would dance around the desk a few times, but then he would come and sign the papers and give commands, and I'm sure arrest criminals and all of that. And finally, one day, he left. So that's the test of whether he is a genuine devotee or not. He left his powerful position, and he went off to Puri to spend the rest of his life serving Jagannath in the most humble of circumstances. I don't know what happened to him finally, but there's a story of there's a description of how thousands of people came to receive him in the station in Puri and all of that. So it still happens. Sri Chaitanya comes back to Puri, and then another amazing thing. Every year Puri is famous for the Ratha Yatra, the car festival. So that's how it came to the notice of the Western world. When the British first colonized India, they must have come to Puri, and then they would have seen the Ratha Yatra, the car festival. So the idea there is Krishna, who is in Dwaraka, once a year he visits Vrindavan to meet his beloved gopis and spends a week with them, then comes back to Dwaraka. So he goes in the chariot. And there are 3 chariots for Krishna and his brother and his sister. So they go in a procession from the temple of Jagannath to a place called Gundichavari in Puri, which is a garden with a lake and everything. So that's the most important festival, and it's very important for Vaishnavas. All Vaishnavas. The Holy Mother, she also went to see that festival. It is said that if you see the Lord in his chariot, mounted on his chariot, that is the end of your cycle of birth and death. That's why millions of Hindus, they believe that our sins are cleansed if you see that sight. And especially if you get to pull the chariot, the rope, they're pulled by the devotees. Interestingly, Holy Mother, she was very delighted to see. And there are hundreds of thousands. Last year itself, there were several million people who came. The British, when they saw those, they are giant chariots, as big as this building. So they asked, "What's that?" And the people, they must have said that's Jagannath. Literally, Jagannath means the Lord of the universe, God. But the British thought they were interested in the chariot itself, this enormous wooden chariot with its huge wheels and all. So they thought maybe that's called the Jagannath, and that's how it became a word in English, in the dictionary, Juggernaut. That's how the word Juggernaut has come, like an enormous vehicle which rolls over everything and crushes everything. So it comes from the original Sanskrit Jagannath. So the car festival. And it was time for the car festival. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with his disciples and devotees, they cleansed the entire temple. The descriptions of how they had 100 pots for water and 100 broomsticks to clean and scrub and the entire temple. Then Jagannath is brought out and all his finery by the temple priests and mounted on those huge wooden chariots, which are pulled by the devotees. And the first servant of Jagannath is the king of Puri, of course, the Gajapati, the Lord, Elephant Lord. Even till today, he comes and first sweeps the path in front of the chariot first to begin the. Of course, he's a king, so he has a golden broom. So he sweeps the path with the golden broomstick. Even now, you can see that in the beginning of the car festival. It's called the car festival. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there, he arranged for the Kirtan, the singing and chanting and dancing, and a description of how 7 groups, large groups of singers, and they had, in every group there were people playing those big drums, the khols and the cymbals. And there were 7 groups, 4 in front of the chariots of Jagannath, 2 by the side and 1 at the back. And they say miraculously, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he seemed to incarnate or appear in each of the groups. He sang and danced with each of them in a frenzy. People would press around in astonishment to see that. His singing, his chanting, his laughing, he would race back and forth in front, and it would be like, often the dance that they do is almost like the ocean, the Bay of Bengal, as the waves roll in, so thousands of people rushing forward like this and then receding back. So a very graceful kind of dance. Holy Mother, when she went, we're jumping ahead hundreds of years, she was very happy to see this. And the famous saying is there, Ratheja Vamanam Drishtva Punarjanmana Vidyate. When you see, Vamana is the dwarf, that means the Lord, in the chariot. When you have a vision of the Lord in the chariot, Punarjanma, the cycle of birth and death comes to an end. It has a deep Vedantic meaning, of course. What it means is, this is the chariot, the body is the chariot, and the dwarf in the body is our real nature, the Atman. To trust Vedanta to take all the fun out of it. And the mother said that, I was so happy, thinking so many people are getting liberated. And then she says, in the next moment, I realized that no, all will not get liberated. Only the ones, nirbhashana, those who have no more desire. Only those who have no more desire, they will get liberated by this side. But if you have desires, you'll have to come back again, no matter how many car festivals you see. You have water? Okay, that's all right. There is a story of how, as the car festival proceeded, in the afternoon, the cars, the chariots stop, and everybody sits for lunch. Enormous quantities of food are, of course, served to the deity, and that becomes prasad, the food offerings for everybody. Chaitanya slept. He was absolutely exhausted by the whole morning's dancing. But in the afternoon, when the car was about to start again, it wouldn't move. And the devotees pulled and pulled and pulled. It didn't move. And then the elephants were brought out to pull, and the elephants tried and didn't move. And then they went in alarm to Chaitanya, the cars are not moving. He comes out and the story goes, he gives a little push and the car fairly rattled along after that. So there are stories like this. And then they go to Gundicha, the garden there, and the narrator says, this was the time that it really happened, that Krishna is there, not just in worship and in visualization, but Krishna is there himself with the gopis, with the devotees. And then the return from the Gundicha to the temple. So this was an extraordinary event etched into the memories of those who saw it and heard about it. But his original desire to go to Vrindavan was always there. So next he decided he will go to Vrindavan, the place where thousands of years ago Krishna actually sported with the gopis. So he went from Puri first to Bengal, and to seek permission from his mother. Because it's very interesting. Why would he do that? Because he was in Puri with permission from his mother. So to go to Vrindavan, he wanted permission from his mother. And his mother gave him permission, so they started out for Vrindavan. It's a big deal, 2,000 kilometers nearly from there to over forests and difficult places. And many things on the way. Then they reach Vrindavan, and he's of course in an ecstasy, singing and dancing. Almost nothing was there at that time. But what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, important for today's Vrindavan, in his ecstatic experiences, he found out the spots which are mentioned in the Bhagavatam, where Krishna, the different stories of Krishna associated with different spots. Now there are temples in every spot, but they were all located by Sri Chaitanya and his disciples. So his closest disciples, they were monastic disciples called the 6 Goswamis, Shada Goswami. And the most famous of them were Rup, Sanatan and Jiva Goswami. Rup and Sanatan were brothers. They were actually the very high officials serving the Muslim ruler of Bengal. And they gave up their jobs, and they, like the police director, and they became ascetic monks. And Jiva Goswami was the son of the third brother. The third brother died, but the son became a monk. So Rup, Sanatan, Jiva, these are crucial for the development of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. They are the ones who wrote these extensive Sanskrit works, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Shat Sandarbha. And these are wonderful texts of Vaishnava theology. One of them, I think, Tattva Sandarbha, of the 6 Shat Sandarbhas written by Rupa Goswami, I think. Or Jiva Goswami. One of them was translated by none other than our Swami Atmagyanananda in Washington, D.C. And that was his PhD thesis. It's still published by Motilal Banarsidas. So these monks, they fulfilled Chaitanya's wish that Vrindavan should be revived again as locus of Hindu pilgrimage. It's very interesting. I heard a talk by a scholar who showed Vrindavan is actually very close to Agra, which was the center of Mughal power at that time. So you have a space which is the political power there, and it's a Muslim power. But Chaitanya goes right there, and next to it establishes a sacred space for Hinduism, revives it. It was there, but it was sort of forgotten. And now, of course, it's an enormous pilgrimage center. I mean, people, Hindus generally, they all visit Vrindavan. They were afraid, the devotees, that he would never come back from Vrindavan. The number of times he jumped into the Yamuna, because this is the Yamuna or the river of Krishna. So they had to pull him out, rescue him for the fear that he would drown. And there were people always with him so that he would not fall down. He was so often in ecstasies. On the way back, on the way there he had gone to Benares. On the way back he came again to Benares, the great city of Hindu learning and spirituality. There the important incident is the conversion of Prakashananda. He's one of the leading non-dualists of that time. Swami Prakashananda, he is the author of the very extreme form of non-dualism, Drishti Shrishti Vada. The idea that the world is your dream. And there's a book, Vedanta Siddhanta Muktavali, the gem of Vedantic conclusions, the garland of gems of Vedantic conclusions. Now, this Prakashananda scoffed at Chaitanya. Somebody told him, a monk comes to this holy city, and he's the most extraordinary being. He sings and dances and weeps incessantly at the name of Krishna, and people are entranced by him. They swirl and dance around him all day long. And Prakashananda scoffed. He says, this is sheer sentimentality. This is what utter nonsense. So, but people are attracted to him. Thousands flock to him. And he said, he's some kind of a sorcerer or a magician. He's casting a spell on people. Well, I'll set him right. And he goes and challenged Chaitanya. And like, what is this nonsense? And stop all this. Study Vedanta. Back to logic. And Chaitanya engaged him in debate and defeated him. And Prakashananda also had the vision of Chaitanya as that 6-armed deity, as Rama, as Krishna, and as Chaitanya. So Prakashananda was converted. He took another name. He remained a monk, but became a Vaishnava monk, and he wrote many books, and he preached bhakti thereafter. He wrote a book, Chaitanya Chandramrita, the moon-like nectar of Chaitanya. It's like a life and teachings of Chaitanya. And he spread bhakti. So, there in Benares, Chaitanya started the study of bhakti and the practice of devotion, love of God among the Vedantic monks, the sannyasis. And he emphasized the study of Bhagavatam, that Bhagavatam is the true commentary of the Vedanta Sutras. So from that time onwards, a strong current of bhakti flowed there. He was, of course, contemporary with Madhusudan Saraswati, who was a giant of Advaita Vedanta, who wrote Advaita Siddhi, but also supported the introduction of bhakti practices among the Vedantic monks also. Notice, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was a member of Shankara's 10 orders. He was Sri Krishna Chaitanya Bharati, which is one of the orders. He had two gurus who were also part of Shankara's 10 orders, Ishwar Puri and Madhav Puri. And interestingly, both were devotees of Krishna. So it's not that Chaitanya was the pioneer of devotion among the sannyasis, but he certainly revolutionized. And then from Vrindavan, he comes back and lived the rest of his life in Puri. Same way of singing and dancing and spending a lot of time training his disciples to carry forward the teachings and the spread of bhakti among the masses. It was for the masses, not just for scholars and monks. There was a monastic order of the Goswamis. It's still there. And a religion of the masses, open to everybody. And notice, he didn't discriminate. People of any caste, they would come. Men and women, young and old and children, Muslims, so those who are not Hindus also. There was not the slightest hesitation for anybody who had the love of God, loved Krishna, would be open. It was open to him. And it had a great impact, mostly on the eastern part of India, because there were other powerful bhakti movements in other parts of India around that time. But the story, after sort of a hibernation of maybe 500 years, it took on another life itself here in New York. When one of the monks of that order, Srila Prabhupada, comes here to New York and teaches what Chaitanya had taught there, the same practices, the same philosophy and all of that. And it caught on. Here first in New York, so New York is a pioneer that way, and then across the United States, and then across the world now. So what Chaitanya wanted 400 or 500 years ago, that the love of Krishna should spread across everybody, that's a fact now, and miraculously so in 500 years' time. So that's the story of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Today we pray to Thakur Ma Swamiji, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to bless us. The reason we discussed it today was it's very close to his birthday. His birthday is what the Hindus celebrate as Holi. Dol Purnima is the birthday of Krishna Chaitanya. May they bless us with intense, unconditional, pure love of God in this very life itself. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.